And we have to think about those things. Is this connection that we have, am I dating someone? Is that going to bring me closer to God, or is that going to bring me further away from God? That's what you have to really be real with. If I date, am I dating out of desperation because I don't want to be alone and that's a fleshly thing? Or am I like, I'm going to date so that this person can bring me back to God, can lead me closer to God? That should be the driving factor. But people, sadly, worldly, it's like, oh, I just date out of lust. I date because they're attractive. I date. And all of that is temporary stuff. And then they wonder why their relationships are roller coastery. Happy when it's good, sad when it's bad. Because feelings fade, attraction fades, beauty fades. But the one thing that's not going to fade is the covenant between us and God. It's the promise. It's the love of God, right? And if you're not focused on the love of God, everything else is basically a distraction. It'll just distract you from your purpose. Welcome to episode 7 with the Unlearn Wisdom podcast. Today we're talking about...
What's your name?
My name is Juanito Changalito. And today we're talking about relationships, guys.
Let's go.
So relationships, biblical relationships, dating, coworkers, marriage, everything related to relationships, guys.
And before we begin, it's the same old. Like, comment, and subscribe. We're reading all your comments. We love the support. And if you're listening on an audio platform, 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Music genuinely helps. It's free. Goes a long way. Well, let's start us off. Please explain to us, what is a biblical relationship?
It depends, right? Like if you're talking about marriage, for example, biblical marriage in terms of that relationship it's not like something that's legalistic, but it's something that you reflect. So you reflect Jesus inside of that relationship. A lot of people think it's rules. It's not rules, it's reflection, different R's, right? So people think like, oh, I gotta love my wife and of course you gotta do those things, but people do it as almost like a checkbox versus actually reflecting the love of God as being a byproduct of the love of God when they, treat not only their children, their wives, everybody. All relationships should be reflecting Jesus Christ, being Christ-like, loving on people. It's not, I'm going to do this and then I get that transactional type of stuff. And that's where people get it wrong. Well, on your birthday, I did this. So on my birthday, it's like, people think compromise is also part of a relationship, but what happens if one person feels like they're doing 100%, but to the other person, that 100% is 50%? Now you can't compromise because they're thinking they're doing 100. But I feel like you're doing 50. Where do we compromise with that, right? It's more about acceptance.
How do we know whether or not we are truly reflecting Jesus? And how do we know who is right, quote unquote, right or wrong in a decision?
So I think when it comes to relationships, obviously everything is like kind of subjective, and relative to the situation. But let's say if you're compromising when it comes to just a couple, you have to see if you're fighting for somebody or with somebody. So a lot of people, they fight with each other. Well, I'm right here. No, you're not right. I'm right here. Rather, are you guys working together in unity off of one goal? Or are you guys fighting because it's from a position of ego, right? So a lot of people are like, they don't want to be wrong, so they're gonna fight and die on a hill essentially for something that's not even worth it, right? So what we say essentially is, instead of winning arguments, you have to win souls, right? So am I gaining the soul of my wife, or for the spouse, my husband? Or are you gaining the souls of these people? Or are you just trying to like win an argument at the cost of like pissing everybody off just for the sake of being right, just because you feel like you're right? Is it not bettering the relationship, right? You have to fight for something that's bettering the relationship overall versus, well, I feel like this is right and it betters me, but I don't care if it betters you or the children or anyone around me.
Coming at it as a team. Like, I remember one time you said, nobody fights like saying, you were right, I'm so wrong. You were right the whole time. That's not how people fight.
True.
They say, I was right and you were wrong.
Yeah.
Let's say you both work. It's a man and a woman and they both have a 9-to-5 job. But the man feels like, hey, it would be nice if you, as the woman, I came home to dinner and a clean house.
Yeah.
They do the equal amount of work. She's like, wait a second, I make money too. I would like the same. What happens in that argument?
I think it comes down to grace, right, as well. It's like, okay, when you're in a relationship, if both of you guys are thinking for the other person, you wouldn't even have this argument. So let's say like how Jesus thought for us, he laid down his life for us, he served us. If both people come and they serve the other person to exactly what they need. So let's say the woman in this case is like, well, my husband, although I work, my husband wants X, Y, and Z. Let me serve him. Let me reflect the love of Jesus, right? Versus trying to, validate my own feelings and my own standards and doing this like quid pro quo, this for that type of thing, transactional based thing. And let's say the man has the same mindset of, you know what, I worked too and I'm a breadwinner, but I'm going to help her with some laundry from time to time. I want to do this for her. If you guys are working like that together in unity, how then can you actually fight? If I'm thinking for you and all of your needs and I put myself second and you're thinking about me and all of my needs and you put yourself second, how is that not going to work? Like it's going to work. But most people are, I'll do this if you do that. And it's all transactional. Even in the most foundational level, it's, okay, I worked, so now you have to do this. And it's like, no, what if I work and I'll do this? And they're like, no, if I work, I'll do this. You guys would fight about like who's going to do the work, basically, who's going to love each other more versus like, I love you more. No, I love you more. And it's like this, right?
I guess the examples that I'm using are a lot of like tasks, but can you explain to me what it means to be equally yoked in a relationship?
So equally yoked means to have one accord in the gospel. A lot of people think like you have to force your significant other and they have to have salvation before you actually yoke together with them. The Bible, a lot of people misinterpret 2 Corinthians when it says these verses. It doesn't mean that just because they're not saved, you forsake them. Because if you actually think about it, everybody was unequally yoked at one point. Not everyone was born Christian. Like we also had to come to like the coming of Jesus moment, have a relationship with him. So when people misconstrue that and say, you're not equally yoked, so you have to leave them, that's not biblical at all. Jesus, he basically being unequally yoked is I'm going to draw the boundary and not allow you to take me away from God. That's what it means. I can still love on you, but draw my boundary and focus on the relationship that bleeds into all other relationships, which is God, right? So people, it becomes a problem when you're unequally yoked, when that person drags you away from God, essentially, right? It's not, oh, you don't believe in God, I don't believe in God, we can't be together. Well, no one believed in God. Everyone started off unequally yoked, technically. And imagine if Jesus treated us like that. Oh, you don't believe? Get out of here. You don't believe? Get out of here. That's not what it means. So equally yoked means in one accord, focus on the gospel. And like I just said, thinking about each other's hearts versus actually your own heart. The way of the world is individualism, right? And it says don't have anything to do with the world because that's unequally yoked. But what that means is if you're just focused on yourself, that's what the world teaches you, self, right? And you're not focused on that, then you are unequally yoked.
When are you supposed to get equally yoked? Like, because there's phases when you first meet someone, now you're talking, now you're in a relationship, now you're married. It's like, because there's different weights along the way that you're pushing and pulling. It's like, do you have to commit to the equal yoking right away when you meet someone?
Not necessarily. I think when it comes down to like remembering your purpose, right? So a lot of people, they date and they kind of have this mindset of, I need to force this person into like my religion, right? That's not necessarily true though. You are to, again, reflect the love so that they see it's an invitation, not a force. Because if you are called to love somebody, you can't force somebody to love you. That's not love in itself, right? You have to be able to be like, okay, you're reflecting like all the peace, all the hope, all the happiness that they're missing. And we believe as Christians that if you don't have the gospel in your heart, then it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much faith you have in yourself. You're never going to be happy, right? It doesn't matter how much money you have because a full bank account does not equate to having or filling an empty heart. So God wants us to recognize it's just reflection.
What would you say are signs that you're ready to date?
When your relationship is very, very strong with God. Because think about it. If you can't even love somebody who deserves to be loved, which is God, God has no blemishes. He's perfect. He's loving in itself. He's, very, very compassionate, God of peace, God of mercy. If you don't even know how to love that person, how then can you love somebody who has all of these blemishes, who is shortcoming, who's imperfect? How can you then love them? And that's why people jump into these relationships and they're super like messed up.
You basically want me to be single forever. How,
That's not
like, because
true.
everything that you just listed, like, for example, like, I don't think I ever measure up to that. You know what I'm saying? Like, even now in my current relationship,
Yeah.
I find myself falling short all the time. When you say all that, I'm like, I'll never be that.
Who's telling you that though? Your thoughts. Don't trust your thoughts.
So then you go to would you say go to a spiritual leader who's
Of course.
kind of, okay.
Of course. So if you don't know how to love God, right, then there are people who actually love God and you can learn from them. I don't know how to, change a transmission. If my car breaks and the transmission has issues, I don't try to be like, I don't know, like, and try to do it myself or watch a YouTube video. You have to go to a transmission specialist. It's the same thing. The heart doctor, the people who love God, our pastors, ministers, people who they've set up. If you think about the way God leads, it's always never through a cultural thing, but it's always through a hierarchy, right? God had, for example, Moses. Why would he not just kill off the Egyptians and then free the Israelites by himself? He's God. He can snap his finger and wipe out nations, right? Why does he have Noah build an ark? Like, he built the whole world. Why would he have somebody else build an ark? It's to establish that there's a need for a mentor, a servant, a spiritual leader who will then guide everybody else, because we're tangible, we're relatable, and it's like we lift each other up. It says it in Ecclesiastes.
So you gotta love God first.
Yeah.
How are you gonna waste so much time on someone who wouldn't even hold the door for you, but you're not gonna spend time on the guy who died for you?
Bars.
Come on.
It's true.
Yeah.
Facts, bro. Yeah, people focus on like compatibility more than calling, right? It's different C's. So like when you look at someone and they're stepping into their calling, then what happens then, which is the gospel, spreading the gospel, then you start to kind of like only look at people and checkbox them. Because then you're like, am I compatible? Okay, they have this issue, they have that issue. And it's not a bad thing in itself, but if they don't have in the center, they're not gospel centered, then they won't know how to truly surrender. Because what they're going to do is they're going to bring their checkbox, you're going to bring your checkbox, and you're going to try your hardest to compromise between the two. But at that foundation, it's flawed already. Because it's like, oh, I have my standard and you're going to have to mold to mine. Well, what if I can't mold to yours? Then it's over. That's basically what it means. You can work it out. You can waste time. Later on, it just builds resentment because you're like, I tried this, I tried that. And many of us have had this. And it ends up just being horrible. So when a person learns, I don't care about my standard, I'm now, surrendering my standard and taking God's standard, and then that person also takes God's standard, then you guys are now aligned, at least spiritually, foundationally. There will be obviously some things that you struggle with, but it will be a spiritual battle versus like I don't like the way, you don't pick up your socks. And it's like, well, I don't like the way you tie your hair. And it's like all this stupid small stuff, right? You fight over nothing. You miss the forest for the trees, basically.
But on that tip, though, you said it's not equally yoked doesn't necessarily mean don't date non-Christians or
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yes.
But to me, one of the key criteria for you for a successful relationship is someone that lives on God's principles.
Yeah.
Would you say that if someone is single and they're Christian, to avoid someone that's a non-believer?
Not necessarily, but I think you have to pursue with purpose and intention, right? There has to be an end goal, right? It can't be compromised when it comes to that. Because at the end of the day, we're called to walk in truth, but people like focus on chemistry, right? Oh, I have chemistry. It feels good. But at the end of the day, feelings change, right? Looks change. Attraction changes. If that's your driving factor, your relationship will go out the window too once things change. So your heart has to be rooted in, okay, are we both walking towards God? And if we're not, is there at least an opportunity that they will somehow walk towards God? And is there like signs of it? Are they receptive? Are they people who listen, And even if it's dialogue, if they're willing to have dialogue, not a monologue, well, I don't believe it. A lot of people, they fold when it comes to these types of things. Oh, well, I like her because she's attractive. Or they operate out of fear. Oh, well, this is a person who I care and I don't think I'll find anyone like them. So they're compromising their calling. They're compromising the covenant so that they can feel comfortable in their flesh. They're trading those things. And that's actually not a good thing, right? Because then they'll fold under everything, under any kind of pressure. So you can be basically physically connected to someone, but spiritually divided is what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like physically you can, there's people who sleep around and all that, but spiritually they're not the same.
Give me a little more tactical map. Like, as a Christian, how do you recommend somebody date?
First and foremost, it still comes back to working on your relationship and having solitude with God, right? You have to be able to be like, okay, you have to be real with yourself. Am I walking the path to have a relationship with God? And if not, then what I'm gonna do is basically just have a lot of distractions. I'm gonna waste people's time. You have to be honest with yourself, right? If I'm not fully where I'm at in terms of my spiritual walk, then how then can I lead other people or be the man of the house? Let's say this is for men, right? Or even women. How can I then be the support system, the backbone for my man, if I myself am not even walking spiritually or even know how to serve a God who deserves to be served? How then can I serve somebody who's flawed as a human being and there's going to be trials and tribulations? How then will I muster through that if I myself am not serving somebody who deserves to be served, basically?
If I'm single and I want to get closer to God to be ready for a relationship, where do I start?
It starts with like having solitude with God, right? And kind of like building your relationship with God through prayer first, through community second. So you have to first pray to God, like, God, I want to have a relationship with you. I want to grow with you, because I understand that, instead of trying to find the one, I have to find you, basically, before I'm ready to find the one, right? So asking God and have an actual conversation with him, which is through prayer, step one. Step two is finding a community, because when people are seasoned and you start to see, like, kind of like they mentor you. If you see like biblical couples, even in our church, how they bend for each other, how they break for each other, that then allows you to be like observant towards them. So step one is to pray about it. And go to God about it, right? Ask him to give you the heart to be like, okay, am I ready, right? Step two is observing how other people interact and seeing how they kind of go back and forth, and where they bend, where they don't bend, where they draw boundaries, where they don't draw boundaries. And then the last thing I think is also remembering kind of like that God said, just like he did with Adam, it's not good for man to be alone. See, when Adam was in the garden, God said to dress the garden, meaning to work. And when he was focused on his work, his purpose, that's when God brought Eve. So if you stay focused on the gospel and your purpose, which is the gospel, you learn more, what I call gospel fluency. You become fluent in the gospel because it's like a language. Then God will be like, okay, his preparation time is ready. I'm going to bring him somebody. And that's something that, like, it's all on God's timing. But Adam never asked for Eve. God said, it's not good for you to be alone. Since you've been focusing on the purpose, I will now add to you this woman who brings you joy. And it's kind of beautiful. Like, he like pulls Eve out of his rib. So it's like part of him, right? It means that when he's working and he's, focused on God, then what comes out of that, out of him, is his bride, basically, is his person. So if you want a bride, if you want, somebody, your significant other, you then have to be aligned with God on your purpose as you're focusing essentially on that gospel. And God will bring somebody.
So I'd say like now, today, more than ever, it's really hard to meet people, like even just platonically, work from home. Like even as an adult, luckily all my careers have been very social, so I meet a lot of people, but 90% of my friends, they work from home, they close the laptop, they go to the gym, and then they sit at home. The only places they're really meeting new people is if they're really outgoing, right? So where would you say, as a Christian in the modern age, can you meet new people?
So I think it's okay to obviously do it digitally. The issue is nowadays we're more digitally connected, but physically we're like separated. Like, we can connect digitally and parasocially, but like people are more isolated nowadays more than ever before, right? So this is a big problem, and it's because people are dating not to marry and not to have purpose. They're dating just to have fun, right? What then does that entail? Well, you go to clubs. You're not gonna. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Some of you have. You're not gonna find your wife, your shorty, at a club, right? Because the mindset is just not there. They're there to party. They're there to do all that. So it's okay to, like, again, spend a little bit of time, in solitude, because you're getting prepared basically by God. And I think it's most important to kind of look for somebody through the church, or at least somebody who's centered, right? Gospel centered, gospel aligned, essentially. It has to always tie back into the gospel. It sounds repetitive, honestly, but it's true. Because what they're doing now is they're focusing on God. you're focusing on. It could be a run club. It could be whatever. It can be on Tinder, for crying out loud. It doesn't matter. Swiping right, Christians can swipe right, okay? We can go to the right and we can swipe right. That's what it says in the heaven, right? Just don't go left. I'm just kidding. But what I'm saying is, right, it's not about where, it's more about like the intention behind it. You can go online and meet somebody who is gospel centered. There's many people who are like this, you know, and it's okay. But where is the intent behind the heart, right? So it's not, the question wouldn't be, where do I go to meet people, right? It's more of like, when I meet certain people, is there purpose and intention behind that? Or is it just, I'm desperate, I want to meet them and I want to have fun? Then it doesn't matter what, you can do that at church and still not find the right person, right? I could go to church and just be like, oh, I'm going to sleep around, and it's not going to do anything for you.
Let's say now you're on Christian Mingle. Do your old Tinder DMs still get considered on your judgment day? Like, is that
No.
okay?
Yeah,
It
we're
is
not
finished?
under the law. Yeah, it is finished.
What I
But
would-
don't be a dirty dog.
What do you say to a person that's been trusting God but single for 5 to 10 years?
That's a good question. I think it's important to recognize you're not waiting on any person, you're becoming that person. So even if it takes 5 to 10 years, you're becoming that, right? God is preparing you. People think like, you know, God has to give things right away. God could easily snap his fingers and give somebody to you right now. But why isn't he? It's a season of preparation. And maybe it takes that long, but this is where faith comes, right? And what's beautiful about God is that he says, I'm with you till the ends of the earth. I'm always with you, essentially. He doesn't sleep, he doesn't slumber. But the issue is the enemy attacks you. And also there's pressure in this world that's like, you have to find somebody. You have to find somebody. No, you don't. Apostle Paul wrote 14 books in the Bible, 14 epistles, and he was never married. And he even says it's better to stay single because you're more closer to God. It's not to say that everyone is a distraction, but it's very, very hard to find somebody who's going to be biblically aligned as much as you are when you're preaching the gospel, right? And most people have to be second when it comes to God. So a lot of people don't know how to step into that role. So rather than, you know, I would take it as, wow, God, thank you. If you're keeping me in this season of solitude, it's a good thing because you just want to have your relationship with me and you're building it with me. And it doesn't mean just because you die single, you lost on anything. If anything, Paul gained the world. He gained all of Rome. He didn't have, you know, any issues of like, you know, argue and bicker. He had like full on relation. He was seriously married to God.
Johnny's pro incel. I'm just kidding. You're talking a lot about it's okay to be single, but then what's the biblical purpose of marriage? Because God created man for woman. He created childbirth and those types of things. And also, if you weren't supposed to do it, it would hurt. You know what I'm saying? It feels good too.
It's kind of, everything is kind of symbolic and foreshadowing, right? So the marriage that we have on earth, later on, you guys just become brothers and sisters in heaven. And it's to teach us faith, because it says, for example, that you have to have a helpmeet. They're your helper, right? You've heard this where they say, my wife is my helper. And my dad, I'll share a funny story. He's like, dude, my wife is supposed to be my helper. Like, but all she does is like piss me off. And Pastor Kim, he's a gangster. He's like, but did you go to God about that? He's like, all the time. And he's like, there you go. So it pushes people, right? Although he's joking, he was basically saying like, we always have this like preconceived notion and this standard of like, God, they have to help me in X, Y, and Z. But no, my dad, probably because of my mom, prayed so much more than he normally would if he didn't have her. So it's the same way, right? A lot of you guys can relate to this. How many of you guys, because of your wives or your husbands or your spouses, go to God? Like, God, please, that's your child. You know, I need your help. Like, I can't deal with these people. So I think that's very important. Second is to symbolize surrender, because when you're with somebody, now you're thinking echad, which is unity, as one. You're not moving, and it keeps you grounded and accountable. Because when you're alone, you could technically do whatever you want, right? But then when you're with somebody else, then you're denying your flesh by fighting adultery and lust, right? Some of us deal with this. Most men struggle with this. You're also thinking and planning for somebody else. Because you guys are one, literally bank accounts become one, marriage and status become one, taxes become one. It's proof that, okay, I can't really do what I want to do without having repercussions and affecting other people. And that mirrors us and God. Yes, I'm free, but not everything is beneficial to me. Like I can do certain things, but would God be happy with that? Sure, I can get tattoos. I have, let's say, $10,000, but then wouldn't God want me to spend the 10,000 on the church, on the body instead of my body? You start to then think for other people. It's the same with children, right? You can't just, like, a woman is gonna like smoke weed and do drugs and drink alcohol, but as soon as she gets pregnant, why does she stop? Because now she's thinking for somebody else, keeps her more accountable, actually allows her to live a better life. And it's just like, it's really beautiful. So God, in that case where people can't lead their lives, it's better to actually get married, because then you have to now learn responsibility, right? In Korean, Chinese as well. A lady doesn't become a woman until she has a kid. There's a saying like this. And why is that? Is because the responsibility comes. You start to think for other people. You can't just live for yourself. And marriage is the same way. You now have somebody with a whole different set of personalities and a whole different set of like beliefs, and now you have to mold and mesh. But it's kind of like iron sharpening iron, rocks that smooth out, pressures making, diamonds and stuff like that. It's the same thing. It's all refinement essentially, and it's necessary.
What are signs that God is closing the door on a relationship?
The one tall tale sign is when a person trusts themselves above everything else, when they're not able to be one-hearted with another person, when all you hear is me and I. So I feel like, in my perspective, I'm right, you're wrong. Like you just hear a lot of like individualism, a lot of selfishness. What God will do is that he's going to allow you guys to fight a lot. But what happens is a person's heart will just close and harden. So that's a tall tale sign that somebody has pretty much, God is basically saying like, shake off the dust off of your sandals. Because when you're sitting there and you're bending and you're bending and you're bending, and that person is not bending, not even a little bit, right? Even if you don't see like an inkling of them bending. And what I mean by this is they're not just compromising, they're not even willing to like listen to you. It's all monologue. There's no dialogue. That's when you realize, oh, it's about that time. Because it doesn't matter what you say. They've already completely disrespected you, completely disregarded you, completely closed up. And when that happens, it's a form of abuse, right? Like God didn't allow like us to be free to endure abuse. A lot of people think like, oh, I have to endure abuse, for example, and that's love. That's not necessarily true, right? God obviously, for example, hates divorce, but he doesn't love abuse, right? It doesn't mean like just because you're being abused or it's not working, then you don't, you got to stay. And then like, that's what shows love. That's not true. God is all about boundary drawing too. So it comes down to like when boundaries are drawn and they're constantly being crossed. And then God is going to be like, he's going to give you the heart to not want to love this person anymore. Honestly.
Is it wrong to pray for a breakup?
I think it's wrong only in one thing. Before you're praying for the breakup, you should pray for God's alignment in that relationship. Like, God, what is your will, right? Because if the end result is breakup, you don't have to pray for it. Just do it. You know what I mean? Like, right? But like, rather than pray for the breakup, pray for the makeup. You know what I mean? Like, God, please help me. Is this something that I need to do? Please lead me correctly. Not, God, get him out, get car crash. It's like whatever it is, like good crazy stuff, right? Some of y'all be doing that.
They really want out.
Yeah. But anyways, what I'm saying is, right, it's okay. More than, praying for the breakup, I would say, pray truly to God for the alignment. Hey, God, I feel like this. What do you feel, right? What is your thoughts on this? Can you guide me through the servant? Or is there a word? Or please give me the heart to endure if you want me to. If not, then please cut it for me too. You do it. If you want to break it up, you do it, and it's now kind of gives the free will back to God, making it God's will. So I always say this, but people who are smart, they have free will, but everyone has free will, right? You have a choice to do whatever you want, believe whatever you want, whatever. But the smartest people give their will back to God, that free will back to God, and it becomes God's will.
What would you say are some common mistakes that you see in couples that come to you for counseling?
A lot of people don't have receptive skills. They don't like to listen. All they talk about is their heart. well, I did this and I did that and I and me, and then he didn't do this and he didn't do that and that made me feel this way and that made me feel this way. So it's this culture of validating feelings. The issue is feelings are not valid. You don't validate the invalid, right? So your feelings change every single day. One minute you're happy, next minute you're sad. And what you're going to do is when you ask your significant other to confirm or validate those things, you're basically asking them to jump on an emotional roller coaster that's not regulated, basically. So you're now happy, sad, all this stuff with them, right? It's important to recognize, and I see this with a lot of people, as soon as I teach them that where the root of feelings come from, which is Jeremiah 17, verse 9, all of your feelings are deceitful, above all things, desperately wicked, and no one knows this, then they start to recognize like, oh, that's true. My feeling may feel right now, but that's just the reality. That's not the truth. Things can change. I thought, for example, being a gang member was, right, I felt like would make me money, and it did. But the truth was, it made me a scumbag. It made me a criminal. It made me a two-strike felon. It put me in prison. So although that reality at that moment was, wow, I'm getting money and women and all that, the end result, the truth was I was miserable. I tried to, unalive. I tried to do all these evil things to myself. So if that was the case, why then, if my feelings were right, it should have been this grand scheme of happiness and my retirement plan, essentially, right? But it was like my expiration date, basically. I was literally fast tracking to my destruction and death. But I say all of that to say, people who sit there and they think that my thoughts are valid and then they tell other people to validate them, right? This is what I'm seeing in our individualistic culture with all relationships and even people who are dating and even single people. They don't want to hold jobs. They're isolated. Why? Because no one's validating their sensitive feelings and they're thinking, well, you guys are the problem. And then they just bow out of everything. So there's no commitment. Everybody's YouTube university. Everybody's I'm right, you're wrong. I know everything. You don't know anything. And it's all feelings based. And what feelings does is it leads you on a roller coaster and spirals and rabbit holes and confusion and just chaos. And God is not an author of confusion. So that's why the narrative and the mantra of the world is follow your feelings, follow your heart, so that you guys can lead yourselves to pure misery, pure destruction, emotional instability, emotional immaturity. All these things stem from, I need to be right. I feel like my feelings are right, and I'm not going to bend that for anybody. And I see that in all relationships. So they'll spend, for example, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to bring two families together in a wedding, and in a year be like, I'm not feeling it, and divorce. And it's all because you didn't validate my feelings. I'm not feeling it anymore. You're just not doing it for me anymore. And I see that with every single couple across the board. Every single couple I deal with. Many people, when they think about relationships, they often think that they have to search for them. But when you look at Genesis chapter 2, it's a perfect blueprint and such a deep unlock on how people can have a biblical spiritual relationship. Adam, when he was created, he was the first man created. God placed him in the garden to dress the garden, meaning to work. And he didn't go out looking for women. He didn't go out trying to appease to anybody. He was just focusing on his solitude and his relationship with the relationship that bleeds into all other relationships, which is God. And essentially, when he was working and he was focused on his purpose and focused on the covenant with God, he was then able to experience a relationship that was divine, not only from God, but he created Eve out of that purpose and pulled Eve from his rib. I used to think, why did God not just create a pile of dirt and blow into it and form Eve out of that? Just like Adam, when he was focused on his purpose and his bride came out of him, out of his rib, Adam was placed into this deep sleep. And deep sleep in Hebrew represents death. So Adam, being the first man, placed into, without sin, by the way, hint, hint, was placed into this death, pulled out of him this rib, and when you're getting cut, think about surgery, for example, you bleed, right? And Adam, who had no sin, put to death, bled, and then pulled out a bride out of that, represents Jesus Christ, who had no sin, was put to death, and out of that death came out the bride, which is the church, which is us. And he bled for us. And this unlock revealed itself after 6 years of reading the Bible. But you don't have to take that long. Yes, join the Deep Dive Bible class at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every Saturday. And we literally go through not only these types of unlocks, but so much deep poetic symbolisms from God. And it's quick. It's hand delivered to you guys. And not only do we do that, but we also talk about how to apply that to your daily life. Because what's the point of reading the Bible if you can't apply it to your life? And if you want to learn more, link is in the description, and you can use code WISDOM for 50% off your first month. See you guys soon. So another question that I see when I'm counseling or mentoring people is, how do I get my significant other to come to Christ, to listen to the gospel, to have faith, essentially? And that one is really, really tough, obviously. But what I tell people is, that person that you're dating, as much as you want them to come to Christ, or that person that you're married with, as much as you want them to come to Christ, there's somebody who's more capable and wants them even more to have a relationship with them, and that's God. So I always tell people, that's not your husband, that's not your wife, that's God's son, that's God's daughter. It's really a faith issue. People have to believe that God wants to save people. I mean, he did 2,000 years ago. If you think about it, he saved everybody. That's why in the Bible it says, I will blot out your name. It doesn't say I'll add it in once you believe and then take it out. Actually, he died for everybody. All he needs is for us to believe. And I'm kind of a prime example of that. My mother had faith that I would come to be the world's best gospel preacher, that I would, be saving souls and evangelizing. I myself did not have faith. I thought my mom was schizophrenic straight up when she said that I would be the world's best gospel preacher. I was carrying a pew-pew and stepping on powder.
Powder.
And, but now I'm over here preaching the gospel. I have a whole career is based off of, prison ministry, podcasts, everything.
With your mom, how many times did she still kind of plant the seed? Like when she found opportunity, she literally just said it to you once and never bothered. No way.
One time.
Really?
One time. She was literally, my pastor told her, who cares about your son more than you? God. Who is more capable of leading him to, church and being a pastor and all these other things? God. So you've already pretty much tried to raise him. How did it work out? You guys too. Try to convince your spouse about the gospel. How is that working out? God wants us to recognize, I'm not going to give you the glory. I'm going to be the one that takes the glory. So I'm going to be the one who also has to do everything, right? We call God our savior, right? We call him our leader. What does Christian represent? It means a follower of Christ. If we follow someone, it means someone is leading. That means the leader takes care of everything. The leader has to do everything. Our leader is Christ. He just wants you to rest. He wants you to believe, and that God will convert these people. And literally, even my brother didn't preach the gospel to him one time. My father didn't preach the gospel to him one time. All I did was, God, you're going to take care of it. And there's some kind of freedom and liberty in that. When you sit there and you go, I trust you, God, I don't even have to push. People start to respect you. You don't get into these fights and altercations with people. You don't close their hearts. And you start to recognize that God really wants to have a relationship, because ultimately God built relationships, right? He could have built us as one, just solitary beings, but we all understand that isolation leads to mental health issues and all kinds of stuff. It's been, even in animals, it's the same way, right? There's very few things that are solitary in this world, isolated. God wants us to recognize he made us creatures of community, and he wants to have communion with your spouse. You have to believe that, though.
I've heard a lot of people come to you for this issue. They convert to the gospel. They find your videos and they get really into you, men and women, right?
Yes.
They're like tuning into your lives and attending your Bible class and things like that.
Yep.
And then there's spouses get upset. They're not preaching to their spouse, but their spouses get upset.
Yeah.
All you do is watch Johnny Chang.
Yeah.
Why do you always listen to this guy? Occasionally, when conflict comes up, they use what you said.
Yeah.
Something I've heard from Johnny Chang was he said this or that, and then they
Yeah.
get upset.
That's why they're upset. You guys need to stop doing that.
That's
I-
a little confusing to me because they're trying to be better. They're like, hey, really?
No. So I never tell people to say, tell your husband what I told you. Every message that I'm speaking to is for you. There's a reason why God didn't put your husband or your spouse in front of me. He put you in front of me. So the message is for you. But you then utilize that. And I'm sorry to say, some of y'all weaponize what I say. And what happens is we're doing the devil's work by doing that. Why? Because inadvertently we're closing our heart, our husbands, our wives' hearts to the servant that's supposed to lead them eventually. So we have to recognize that. It's the same in church with kids. When parents, you guys gossip about your pastors in front of your kids, what you're actually doing is showing them you don't have to respect authority. You don't have to respect the servant. And so that then allows them to go, yeah, well, mom and dad talks about them. Why would I respect them? It happens across the board. It is the work of Satan to do these types of things.
You made me feel so guilty right now because
Yet?
in the live streams, I make the BBL Johnny joke.
Yeah. That's
Wow.
what you do. And it became a baby L Johnny.
Maybe
Yeah.
Johnny.
Good for you. Look at this guy, guys. Look
Guys,
at
is
him.
that song a hit or not?
It's not a hit, dude.
But on that, let's say that they're trying to do they're trying to do step one of what you talked about the podcast. Focus and align yourself to God, and the rest will fall in place, right?
Yes.
So they're doing that by, let's say they're not imposing on their spouse, but their spouse is saying, stop watching his lives, stop going to Bible class. And they're simply saying, I'm trying to get aligned closer to God.
Yeah.
Now, but you were saying a relationship is kind of ready to end when what, right?
Yeah.
How would you handle that situation?
Very simple. Are they knocking you off the path of getting closer to God? And you also have to draw the boundary, right? God, he allows us to have boldness in this way. You can tell people, hey, without this Bible class, I'm not telling you to go. I myself am trying to better myself for you too. And when you repackage it in this way, it's the truth, right? It's a perspective shift. Why am I in Bible class? Not because of what you think I'm doing. I genuinely feel empty. So spouses, you guys have to also be more vulnerable with your significant other. You can't just be like, I'm doing this, it's for God, you need to listen. No, you should actually open up and say, hey, you know how I was. After listening to this dude, because it's not just women, men too, their wives hate and get angry. Well, why are you listening to this guy? Dude, we have a church here. Why are you driving 2 hours to come to this guy's church? Like, doesn't make sense. He's not even a preacher. He's online, right? So what's important is you have to express to them, hey, remember how I was. Lead with the red flags. Talk about your vulnerability. This guy puts it in a way that really makes sense to me, right? And many people, when they follow that, their spouses start to come on and do one-on-ones. Their spouses start to listen and go, wow, I actually hated you at first. I was like, why are you listening to this guy? And it was out of jealousy or projection or just you taking time out. And it's not even that sometimes. They don't even want to be frustrated, but they don't want to be frustrated at their spouse. They're frustrated at somebody else so that they avoid the argument in this way, but still allow themselves to open up. People are just finding a way to rest and kind of like release that, right? So you don't have to react to everything that they say when they say, I don't like Johnny Chang or whatever. They shouldn't, but at the end of the day, it's also your job as a responsibility to like talk to your spouse and be like, hey, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it could just be a miscommunication. 9 times out of 10, it is. People just like don't share. You guys have to learn core of the heart, people listening. You need to share your heart a lot more, because when you don't do that, then lines get blurred, communication dies. And when communication dies, relationships die.
It's really funny because you say not to repeat the advice that you're telling people or not to repeat the answers because that advice was for them.
Yes.
But then I see viral TikToks all the time and the comments are like, please put this on my boyfriend's For You page, not mine. He was supposed to see this, not me.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because you're a social media influencer in a sense. You put a lot of clips on social media. So what do you think about people sending your clips to their spouse and kind of saying, well, look what this guy said, or, kind of, or potentially weaponizing that even?
You have to read the room. You have to have situation awareness. You have to have spiritual awareness, right? Communication, doing those things like outwardly can look good, but internally it can mess things up. I'll give you an example. My mom, right? My whole side of my dad's family hates my mom till this day. Why? Because essentially my mom was a real person. She was Taoist Buddhist. She believed in karmic debt. She believed keeping it real was important no matter what. It doesn't matter what situation. So my cousin, who is from my first uncle on my dad's side, he actually passed away, and he was riding a motorcycle and he died. And that nephew or that grandson, I'm sorry, was the like my granny's favorite. So they go to Korea, and my mom is just livid. Like, why are you guys? It's been 2 years. You've been hiding this from this old lady. But they had their reasoning. This woman will sit there and she would stress out. She's had panic attacks. She's went to the hospital because of these panic attacks, right? She's very like weak in her heart. And that's my granny from my dad's side. And my mom was like, no, I'm going to tell him. And then, my dad was like, don't freaking say anything. Do not say anything to, her, because it could cause problems. And so all the brothers and the sisters didn't say anything. But my grandmother confided in my mom a lot. She really loved my mom. And she's like, I just wish, like, his name is Holy, right? Holy, I wish Holy would, come and visit me. Like, they keep saying he's deployed and he's like in the army. Like, why won't he come back and visit me? I miss him so much. And at this time, my granny's husband, which is my grandpa, my dad's dad, he had passed away too. So she was like grieving, and she really just needed people, right? So my mom, she gets pissed and she keeps asking like, why? And my mom just goes, you know what? I'm going to just be the champion of truth here. My mom goes, do you know what happened to Holy, and you know why you can't see him? And she's like, why? And he's like, because he's with grandpa, meaning like he's dead. And she just wails, starts crying, right? And she literally, like, they believe she passed away from like heartbreak. Like, she literally like died. Like, she never recovered from that. And they obviously blamed it on my mom. And because of that, closed the heart, right? My mom, till this day, they don't F with my mom at all. They don't talk to her. They hate her. They hate her guts. It doesn't matter. She's Christian, all these other things. It doesn't matter. And my mom was able to give testimony one day and go, I was so righteous, self-righteous, that what happened was like I closed the hearts of everybody else. Like, now that I have the gospel, they won't even hear it from me, So it's kind of like really sad, right? In this way, in the same stroke, why I say all of this to say, tying back into what I'm saying, you can send your stuff to people, but the timing has to be right. You can think, oh, this is amazing, but if the timing isn't right, it can actually do more harm than good, right? It can seriously hurt more than it can help, essentially, right? And so I would say, of course, share my things, put it on your story, but to like send it to someone, and even if you send it to someone, don't be like, hey, this made me, you need to listen to this. Like, it's more of, hey, I thought about you when I sent this, and just be ready. If they go, don't ever send me something like this again, then back off. This is me. This is how you know we're not a cult, right? It's like, we're not trying to get the views. We're trying to save souls. Honestly, you can potentially, without you recognizing, close a person's heart through good intention. And I always say this, not all good intention is God intention, right? People think because it's good, oh yeah, this is what God wants. That's subjective, right? Because what's good to you is different than what's good to God, right? There's different standards. So I would say we really have to be careful about those things. Preaching the gospel is something so delicate. It's like vegetables, right? If you feed vegetables, vegetables are good, and kids hate vegetables. And let's say it's good, it's kale, it's broccoli, whatever it is, spinach. And let's say you grab a fork or a spoon and then you start shoving it down the kid's mouth. That is, no matter how good it is, whether it's from Whole Foods or whatever, what's the other places? Erewhon, right? Whole Foods. That's still child abuse, right? So you don't do that, right? It doesn't matter how good the message is. It doesn't matter how good the gospel is. If you do this to people, what's going to happen is you're going to do more harm than you are good. And that's not going to be on them. That's going to be on you. Because God took his time with you. Why wouldn't we allow God to take his time with your significant other, who he cares about way more than you? Bars.
Bars.
It's a good question. Great answer.
Yeah.
Now everyone's going to be sending this post to the person who sends them too many posts.
Yeah, it's interesting how delicate of a balance that is.
Communication is seriously knowing when to say something and when not to say something too.
I guess, and I've been guilty of this too, when I can be so excited because I've seen the impact of something making on my life, where where I see someone in the position that I was, and I'm like, yo, if you step over this line, like, you don't know how much freedom you can have in your life, but it makes way more sense that that's just me trying to put my own selfish timing on something.
Exactly.
And it's also, the lack of faith, or I just want it now, or I think that person should just hurry up and see it, like if they got forced it.
Yeah, we all went through that. Me too. Crazy stories. I line it up with the homies. I was like, man, I know Jesus now. I don't want you guys to go to hell. So how I would preach the gospel was straight up like, hey, check this out. I found Jesus. Do you guys believe? And if you don't, you're going to go to hell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up with you guys. And if I beat you, you got to come to church with me. And they would be like, bro, chill out. And I'm like, fight me. And I became like the devil. And I would fight. I'd line it up with them. And literally, like, even though I would win, they wouldn't come to church. I closed their hearts. So, I mean,
They caught them holy hands.
Yeah. Big surprise they didn't come to church.
The fists of faith.
and then I remember going to pastor about this. I was like, fist of faith is crazy. But I remember going to pastor about this, and I was like, Pastor, man, I'm trying to save them. Don't they see my heart? And pastor yelled at me. He's like, what are you doing? Why are you playing God? Like, and I was like, what do you mean? Like, this is how the dichotomy of gangs are. You fight, and if they listen, you can beat them into submission. What's wrong with that? And he's like, what the heck is wrong with you? You guys are crazy. Mind you, this is a pastor from Korea, bro. It's like, what the heck is lining it up and fading? I remember, like, so I had to line it up, and the guy's like, eh? Like, he didn't understand. The translator was like, what? Line
Like
it up?
you run a race?
Yeah. And then I was like, no, like, we had to fight. And I just remember pastor's face, like, why did you fight? And I was like, he's like, so you fought them because they didn't believe? And I was like, yeah, that's how it works. And he went like that, like, Aish. And he was like, man. And he just like yelled at me, I remember. And I was like, why are you yelling at me? I'm trying to save their souls.
I'm going to save you and you're going to like it.
Yeah.
Can men and women just be friends?
It depends, but 9 times out of 10, flesh is flesh. So what pastor explains, and this is true, women I mentor also been like, I don't know why I cheated with this guy. It was just my coworker. And it was just because you're in the vicinity and you're just flesh is flesh, right? When you get hungry enough, you'll even eat stale, moldy chips, basically. And what that means is Satan always has a foothold in our flesh, because the flesh is weak, it says in the Bible. It's not really good to be around women all the time if you're a man, and vice versa, because feelings of lust can come out of nowhere. Feelings of, intimacy can come out of nowhere. And so you have to keep yourself accountable. And what I was taught was, wherever you go, you should go like with people who will keep you accountable. So I've seen pastor have one-on-ones with sisters, but have another translator or another, sister in the room to kind of keep it accountable. Or he'll open the door so that everyone can see, right? Open the window so everyone can see into his office. Like, it's kind of like he does that on purpose to keep himself, because of course, like, some of these girls are not pretty, right? But he knows flesh is flesh, right? There are people who, they just do certain things and be like, why? I don't even know why I did that. Some of you guys know. Some people came to me, with dealing with infidelity, and they're just like, that girl was fat too, and I don't know why. And I'm like, I know why. It's the gospel. It talks about this. The Bible talks about flesh being flesh, and you just, not in the right state of mind, whether it was an argument, whether it was under the influence, whatever it is, it's not a good thing. But people trust that. Oh, yeah, I can be friends with the girl. I can do this. I've had stories like that, too, where I literally thought one of my homegirls, gang member homegirl, I thought she was my sister. I'll call her sis. Legit thought she was the little sister I had never had. She was gangster, like ran over people, you know, like carried our crazy, straight up like a man, like a dude, right? I consider her like a bro, like a little homie. And one day she got drunk, bro, and she was just like, "I love you so much, Shawty." And I was like, "What?" At first, I was like, "Oh, I love you too, sis." And I know, like, I've always loved you. You're amazing. I want you to be my man. Blah blah. And you know, it crushed me because I was like, "Yo, you're my sister." It grossed me out, crushed me. It made me feel like, how could you do? I felt betrayed, and so it's proof. Flesh is flesh, guys. Like it's gonna happen, you know. And you guys know what I'm talking about. I know girls who tell me I can't have guy friends. They all come, I love you. I've had people who I've done, you know, one-on-ones with, and they have the gay work husband, and they're like, hey, let's, you know, I want to explore with you, and it's like it's devastating for people, but it's biblical, right? Being around somebody and like, it's just that's how Satan utilizes us is through the flesh.
If my girl got a work husband, you could keep her.
She not working no more. You're quitting your job.
You're a stay-at-home wife now?
Yeah.
Welcome home.
What does submission and leadership look like in a relationship that's based on the Bible?
Biblically speaking, you are to surrender to God first. And that's why he teaches us to deny our flesh, to renew our mind, to die to ourselves daily, it says. Why? Well, what makes self? Your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences, your perspectives all make up self, because you're not just a walking shell, right? You have your emotions, you have your experiences. That has to die off, and the word of God has to trump all of that. So if you want to biblically surrender to somebody, it is essentially, again, ties back to the gospel. The gospel of I'm going to trust the word of God above my thoughts, and I'm going to trust my partner above my thoughts even, right? Only if they're biblically aligned, obviously, only if they're gospel centric or gospel centered. So true biblical submission is kind of like when you see different stories in the Bible, people like Rebecca and Isaac, people like, you know, Adam and Eve, when their wives submit to the husband because the husband is submitted to God, basically. That's a biblical thing, right? That's a biblical surrendering and submitting.
I guess like when people think of submission, they're like, you need to cook and clean and do my traditional housewife duties.
No. That's cultural stuff, right? This is covenantal submission, meaning based off of the covenant of Jesus, we submit to people because he submitted to us. Like it's similar to me being a gang member, and then when I don't chastise the youngsters who I see going crazy, at times, you know, we'll get food with them or a couple of them, and they'll be all talking about thug this and thug that and gang life. And I don't chastise them because I understand I was there with them and I exactly was like them. And it's like a level of understanding and compassion and empathy that kind of bleeds out of me. It's the same thing, right? You don't judge other people. You don't, you relate to them, right? So submitting to God is essentially submitting your core values, your beliefs, your perspectives, and just taking up what God is saying, which is the gospel. And yeah, it doesn't have to be a cultural thing. Oh yeah, you know, I have to cook and clean. That would be the byproduct. If you just submitted to God and then you serve like he tells you to, you will also do those things too. And then when you serve, God also, you know, pours out to your spouse. They serve. And then ultimately you guys are just serving each other. And if you're serving each other, how can there be any clash? There's no clash, bro.
So are traditional gender roles not biblical?
They're biblical in a sense, but like also it's more cultural than anything, right? Of course, like there are, you know, men made for women, women made for man. But like to be like, you have to stay home and tend the house, and you know, that's more of a like a cultural thing. In American culture and even Chinese culture, Asian culture is like that. So yeah, I think more than the culture, we have to understand like what is the role of a wife biblically? What is the role of a husband biblically? What are they to do together in unity? And that is actually to preach the gospel. That is actually to, be one-hearted with God, build relationships, and also even have kids to preach the gospel. So our church is like that, where like they stay gospel centered, even with the children. We have Sunday school. We teach them, righteousness, perfection, sanctification. It's kind of wild.
How do you protect your relationship from worldly influences?
It comes down to, again, where is your calling? Where is your heart at? Heart posture. What I mean by that is, are you living for man or are you living for God? If you're living for the world, you will be swayed by the world. Of course, you need to work. You need to have careers. But like, people think that money, for example, is evil. Money is not evil. The love of money is evil. So where you put your love, which is your intent, your heart, if you're using money materialistically, if you're using it for your own financial gain, then it's evil in that sense, right? So it's not about like certain influences. We have to use cars. We have to wear clothes. We have to buy clothes. We have to eat. Of course, those things will influence certain things. But when you start to allow these things to kind of veer you off the path of the gospel and your relationship with God, and it's not adding to your life, it's actually removing you away from spiritual life, then that's when it becomes a problem. You can be on social media. We use social media for advancing the kingdom. You can be there to study the Bible. We use Zoom to do, Bible classes and things like that. But there are people out there who utilize technology, influence it negatively, basically, and nothing that's like salvific or gospel centered.
Yeah. So what does the Bible say about someone's body count? Like, does it matter?
Yeah, I think like sex before marriage, right, is kind of the thing, a hot topic. But body count definitely doesn't matter because there's prostitutes in heaven, harlots in heaven, right? Now, that doesn't mean go and do a free-for-all, right? Because 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12 says, all things are lawful unto me, but not all things are expedient. So things are, okay to do, but they're not beneficial to you. You get what I'm saying? Like, God's not going to strike you down just because you do X, Y, and Z. If that was the case, we would have all died because sin is sin. But God wants to benefit us. He's always team us, essentially, right? So just because you can do something does not mean it's spiritually beneficial to you, if that makes sense, right? So, and then also, when it comes to sex before marriage, most Christians judge legalistically or they ignore the problem. So some people, sex before marriage, it doesn't matter. That's not right either. And then also, they chastise you. They go, you shouldn't be doing that, blah, 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 blah. While that is true, if you're going to do it legalistically, meaning keep all the laws, then you have to keep all of the laws. That means mixed linens. That means no tattoos. That means not eating pork. That means loving your neighbor as yourself, which you don't do, because when you buy yourself a pair of Space Jam 11s, if you love your neighbor, you should also get them a pair of Space Jam 11s. It doesn't say try to love your neighbor. It says do it. And it says if you love God with all of your heart and all your body and all your soul, then every time you're thinking about something that's not godly, you're not loving God. So you're also not doing that. So it's not a legalistic thing. It's not I'm going to do this so that I gain things, right? It's more of I love you so much, God, that I'm going to maintain and abstain from, sexual things. And I'm going to walk in purity because I value the relationship that we have with one another, which is me and God, right? So it depends on what you value, right? If you're with a couple, you're going to, most likely make love and do those types of things. But your intention should be dating to marry, not dating just to have sex, feel things out, wait till your financials is good. And then, right, like your purpose has to be rooted in the gospel, right? Am I preaching the gospel? Am I focused on the gospel? Am I essentially pursuing the gospel? They kind of utilize these things as like a fear-based obedience. Like, if you do this, it's going to mess up. So people get fearful and they try to abstain from sex. But even that in itself, although like surface level, it looks good, but foundationally, it's selfish. Because you're like, I don't want to burn in hell. That's why I'm doing it. It's not a love-based obedience, meaning I love God. That's why I'm going to abstain from it. Does that make sense? Most people are like, nah, I'm going to do this because I'm scared and it's going to hurt me more so than I'm not going to do this because I value the purity. I value that Jesus died for me and I'm not just going to abuse this grace and do whatever I want. right? It's a heart posture thing. Yeah, so something I've noticed with people who have high body counts is that they usually don't know how to self-soothe, or they'll have this heart of there's something better, right? And a lot of the times, like, people need control. That's why. So when you learn, like, at a young age that you're not in control of anything, people kind of get stuck in that. So when I was younger, for example, I felt like I never had control. I didn't have control of my life. I didn't have control of anything really. So I fought to have control of that. And that's a self-soothing issue, right? Like, it's normal to not be in control of everything, but because of the fear, because I didn't know how to emotionally regulate. So then I would, spend my time either, trying to get at girls, or like feeling like I needed to like conquer stuff and be in control of things. And that would lead me to, being lustful and things like that. So a lot of people that I mentor, they have this issue. I've noticed people who who need to be in control. It's like a fear-based thing. Once they feel like they lose control, then they're like now like looking to like reach and take control of everything. And then that's based off of fear and a trauma response, essentially. But self-soothing, things like, prayer, meditation, fishing, finding better things to do to occupy your time. A lot of people don't develop that, right? So what we soothe with is the gospel spiritually. Once I learned that, all these things may soothe me temporarily, but nothing soothes me spiritually, it was that spiritual thing that I was missing. Yeah, temporarily, fleshly, you kind of you can get satisfied, but it's always temporary. It was never something that was spiritual. So nowadays, when I preach the gospel, it soothes me. It like I go out there, even though I take a picture with 300 people, it takes 2 hours to take a picture. It makes me feel spiritually fulfilled. Like, wow, these people came out, they got saved. And that's something that that gives me power to overcome the lust, power to overcome, anxiety and depression and all these other things.
So what's the spiritual approach to just ignoring red flags?
Spiritual approach to ignoring red flags, recognizing that the red flags can never actually affect you if you believe in God who's protecting you. People kind of, again, checkbox, and it's okay. It's okay to obviously be like, okay, red flag, this guy's a liar. Like, those are things you have to observe. So when you judge somebody to be like, oh, I'm better than them and they're liars and that's why I can't be with them because I'm not a liar, that's actually an issue, right? It's more of like, instead of judging for them, why not pray for them, right? Why not be like, hey, just so you know, like, I know there's some stuff going on internally. You're not going to see them again, and be like, I just didn't respect the fact that you lied to me and you thought that I didn't notice that. And I know, maybe people don't tell you this, or maybe but deep down, those are not really, like, that's not a good characteristic to have if you're actually going to be dating somebody. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not a judgment. That's an observation. That's a fact, So it's okay to like talk about red flags and like even lead with your red flags. Being vulnerable is also another thing. Spiritually, God wants us to be vulnerable. There's a story in the Bible where Jesus heals a man with his withered hand. He literally puts him in the middle of the synagogue and he tells him, stretch forth your hand to be healed. Now, if this guy stretched forth his nice hand that's already healed, he wouldn't see any healing. He had to expose that festering, rotting leprosy hand, right? It's the same thing. God always wants us to be vulnerable because when there's a superpower and kind of a benefit of being vulnerable. When you lead with your red flags, people are not caught off guard, and those are the people that really mess with you. When you draw a boundary, it doesn't push people away. It actually shows you who deserves to be closer to you and who really messes with you. So
Bum, 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 bum. It's Ask Johnny Chang Anything.
So for this segment of the podcast, we actually go to our Discord and we pull some questions, questions related to the topic of relationships, and we're going to answer them. So we'll start with the first one. It says, and this question is from Discord, from David. He says, does God say anything about getting back with an ex? Is it a bad thing to do, or is it okay as long as they follow and believe in God? God doesn't say anything about specifically getting back with an ex, but obviously it comes down to forgiveness, right? But it also comes down to the heart posture. Jesus also, biblically speaking, says on the cross, Father, forgive them for they do not know what they do. So the criteria here is, did they know what they were doing? Were they intentional with it? Secondly, it's also recognizing in Romans chapter 7, verse 15, that they probably, even if they knew what they were doing, they don't want to do that. So technically, when you look at the Pharisees that crucified Jesus through the Roman soldiers, they knew what they were doing. But actually, deep down, they were being dragged by Satan to do so. So if you can recognize that, does this person truly have remorse in their posture? Do they really, when you explain these verses to them, hey, I recognize you didn't want to do that. Romans 7:20 says, if I do the things I don't want to do, sin is doing it inside of me. And they personify sin as a person, like Satan, essentially, dragging you. And if they recognize, yeah, you're right, I didn't want to do that. I regret everything that I did. I truly wish that I can do better. And if I can change that night, I think it's okay to do so. But more importantly than getting back with your ex, I would say, is to preach the gospel to your ex if you have a chance. And then through that, you then pretty much 100% of it is like done for you. And you can sit there and connect on a deeper level than even when you first met them in their secular ways while you guys were both in the way of the world. So yeah, I would say it's okay to do so. Is it okay as long as they follow and believe? Yeah, so it depends on if they believe or follow in God. And because not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, shall enter my kingdom, right? They have to have true biblical salvation. They have to believe that sanctification is not a process. It's already done, Hebrews 10:10. They have to believe that Jesus made them righteous, perfected now, and holy forever, Hebrews 10:14. And essentially, they have to place God above their thoughts in all circumstances, in all situations. Even though they're struggling at times, I mean, they can't do it all the time, but they have to at least have the heart posture to be like, I'm trying to now live for God above myself, right? They can't try to accessorize God and be like, well, this makes sense to me, I'll follow that. This doesn't make sense to me, I reject that. Then it's probably not better to get back with someone like that. They need to spend more time in solitude in a season of working to rebuild their relationship with God. And if you guys like questions like this, we do a free live event called After Service, where we do sermons, live Q&As, and fellowship. To RSVP for a city near you, text afters to the number below. See you guys there. So the next question we have from Discord, this person wanted to stay anonymous, asked this question. My husband wants polygamy, but I want to live how God says. Am I lying to myself and I know what I have to do? You shouldn't allow polygamy. God says in the Bible that to have one person, right? Echad, which means to be one. Adam and Eve, right? They were one-hearted, one body, one soul, one mind, two separate beings, right? And when things got tricky was when Hagar came into the picture and they started to kind of fight more and do all these things. So it's not a good thing to have polygamy in your relationship, because when you look at King Solomon, he was the wisest man, but he had 700 concubines. He had 700 wives, 300 concubines. And it really, he fell from God during that point where he was focusing on women, different types of women. And it really, it really distorted and became a distraction from his actual purpose. Same with King David when he had all his concubine, when he was focusing on Bathsheba, who wasn't his wife, but was Uriah's wife. He was home wrecking. That's when things started to get really dicey. And even me, I've mentored people who women allow their husbands to go out and do those things. They're even in like love triangles, and it never works out. It's always jealousy. It's always, okay, they meet on the side and they didn't agree to this. It just causes so many more problems. Biblically out the way, spiritually out the way. Logically speaking, human beings are naturally made just to like be selfish, right? And they're not going to be okay with it. And even if it does work out, in the strange case that, everyone's perfect and it's all fine and dandy, what would your Father in heaven feel about that, right? We don't live for ourselves. We live for God and under his standard. And if we're called to be a Christian, it means we are followers of Christ. We then must obey what God is saying, not what we think and feel, and place our feelings and our lusts above the word of God. So yeah. No, prison, no, good, no. One woman, one man. Yes. This is another question from our Discord. They asked, my partner and I fight a lot about sex. What does a healthy sex life look like to God? I think it's submission, right? Submitting to one another. And I had mentioned sex in marriage is actually really good for intimacy, rekindling things, being warm, and just kind of exploring each other. But I think if you guys are not spiritually connected, then even if you're physically connected, you won't feel the love, right? It's a spiritual thing too. It's not just a physical thing. You got with your husband, you guys got with each other, so you guys can connect deeper. So I think it's important to have like a talk with your spouse, one of those hard talks, but to just really figure out and drill down as to why you guys stopped doing those things. It is normal, however, just so you know, to like kind of taper off when you're growing spiritually. The physical side does kind of go down a little bit. This is actually biblical because you're now fulfilling your heart with things that are just like deeper, right? It's kind of like people treat sex kind of like sugar, like a sugar rush. So when you're not spiritually connected and you have sex, of course, in the beginning, it gives you this dopamine rush, but in the end, it makes you feel groggy and nasty, right? It's the same thing. Spiritually, if you don't, aren't connected, then you'll physically feel good temporarily, but then spiritually you'll be drained afterwards, right? So people treat sex like sugar. You shouldn't do that. Rather, you should treat it like wine, right? Things that are aged and things that are nurtured become more valuable over time, become more, they become more valuable. So try to focus more on, it's not really the intimacy part. You guys can be intimate spiritually, and that's actually a big level up for most people. But Satan attacks. That's not good enough. You guys aren't sleeping around with each other anymore, so that means you guys are disconnected. And this is why I always teach about distrusting your thoughts and distrusting the circumstance and seeing, did we grow as human beings together? Did we progress one another? Did we push each other towards God? And if you did, that's a win-win. It doesn't matter, if you guys are intimate or get the cheeks. There's another question from Discord, and they asked, if I've put God above all things, why do I so deeply long for a spouse? I'm just going to be honest here. It's because you didn't put God above all things. Because if you did, you wouldn't long for anything, right? When you place God above all things, it says in Matthew 6, all else will be added unto you. So there's an interpretation of, we think in our standard that we put God above all things, but the Bible literally tells you can't do that. Like, that's pretty much impossible, right? So what allows you to have humility and move with humbleness is the idea that I can't do it. That's why God has to do it. So it's okay to long for a spouse, but you also have to recognize your true spouse is God. So it kind of doesn't make sense. If you say your true spouse, your true husband, which is God, and you've placed him above everything, then you would be longing for him, or you wouldn't actually be longing because he's right there with you, right? So we have to understand that spiritually, we need to be aligned more with the gospel and what it actually means to place God above everything else. And what that means is placing the gospel above all things. If God doesn't give you a spouse for the rest of your days, we can say amen, hallelujah. That is actually what placing God and his will and his choice above everything else is. Not, I want this, but I placed him here. So we have another question from Anonymous on Discord. It says, can you marry someone who is non-religious or secular? I wouldn't. And it's not to say that they're bad people or, but if you guys don't have the same faith, then it's kind of like two oxen pulling in opposite directions, right? We don't have to get into, the making them. We don't have to force them into our religion, obviously. We can do it out of love. We can show them testimony. But if you're not married yet, it's important first for them to get right with God biblically, right? And it's not to force them. We all have to get right with God. We all have to find that higher power, that purpose. But if you have a certain set of morals for the gospel and you're following, a certain type of religion like Christianity, then it's going to be kind of impossible to follow those same morals on another like spectrum with another religion. It's just how it is, right? If God says, for example, animals don't have souls, and you go to a religion where they say animals do have souls, right then and there's foundationally, you guys are going to be off. You guys are just going to clash. So it's important to, and this is why God is telling us, not in a legalistic manner, but he wants everyone to be one-hearted. Well, if you start off your foundation as not being one-hearted, then it's actually detrimental to both of you guys. Rather, you shouldn't be together, you know? Maybe date, not marry. Date, definitely, I would say. But marriage is a whole nother level, whole nother ball game. I think it's important to both of you guys be aligned in everything, just like you would be aligned in your finances. You would be aligned in your living situation. Why wouldn't you be aligned in the thing that aligns everything all together, which is the spirituality side, right? So
My question is, what does it look like to actually be spiritually aligned in a marriage?
So both of you guys focusing on the will of God, crushing your own will. So like, okay, what does God want in this marriage, right? Not what do we want in this marriage to serve God, of course, but what would God want for this marriage? What did he bring us together for? And at the end of the day, it's literally to be one-hearted with him. Well, what's his heart? John 6:40 literally says the will of God, which is preaching the gospel. So you guys can do your stuff. You know, you have your agency. She does what she does. You guys work together. But it's to advance the kingdom at the end of the day. If you guys have that one goal, then you're spiritually aligned, not only with each other, but with God, right? People try to align with each other. It's like a horizontal relationship, but you have to focus on the vertical one first. So when you're like focused here, then it's like both of you guys just hit that same target, and you guys, the byproduct is you guys are horizontally aligned as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then that goes into my second question. Then what does it look like to be spiritually aligned? Like I'm spiritually aligned with God, and then I'm also married, and to be spiritually aligned with my wife, and her being spiritually aligned with God as well.
Yeah. So it comes down to, are you guys both pushing the will of God together, right? So she could do, let's say she's a barber. She could be preaching the gospel through that. She doesn't have to do exactly what you're doing. And she doesn't even have to, like, it's not amount of prayer. It's not really anything that shows in terms of even like the fruits. It's more of where is the heart posture at? Because let's say you're saving 20 people a month and she saves 3 people a month. That doesn't mean you guys are not spiritually aligned, if that makes sense, right? It's not an outcome dependent type of thing. It's more of where is her heart? Oh, she wants to impact people, and she also wants to be aligned spiritually. She also wants to serve God and follow God, right? And she wants to preach the gospel. And you're doing the same. You may be blessed with 30 fruits, 60 fruits. She'll be blessed with 40 fruits, 100 fruits. It doesn't matter. Like being spiritually aligned literally means, okay, I'm not living for you. I'm living for God. And you're living for God too. And that's what's going to make our bond stronger. Because now all of our arguments, and you will argue at times, is not about whether you did anything to me, but it's more of like, like I'll give you an example. Pastors, when they argue, it's always about the gospel. It's like the sister will be like, oh, you know, I feel tired and I feel depressed and I'm angry. And then the pastor would be like, you're angry, but like, why are you angry? Did God tell you to do something to save this sister? No, God's going to do it. Why don't you have faith? So it's like a different fight versus like, oh, I already got my nail appointment and you didn't take me to the nail appointment. And God says you should submit to me. So it's not this hard. It's more of like, why are you fighting? Why are you assuming the identity that you're a worldly creature, and you're not of this world, right? God is telling you you're a new creature. Why are you not assuming that identity? So it's all biblical stuff.
So scripture says that it's the husband's responsibility to like lead through marriage, right?
Yes.
What does that mean, and what does it look like?
So there's all of us, when you think about it in the embryonic stage even, we're all females first, right? And we are the brides of Christ. God says that Jesus was the bridegroom and he married the church. So technically, what God is trying to explain here is we are all people who need to submit to God. You know how it says wives submit to your husbands? The deep unlock here is we're all wives of Jesus. That's what he's trying to say. So likewise, if you look at Adam and Eve, for example, right? The common misconception of people, not just with Adam and Eve, is, oh, I am the man, so I need to take lead. And of course you do under the word of God, but you also have to recognize it's Jesus who leads you to lead, essentially, right? People kind of miss that part and be like, okay, it's my responsibility, and they kind of enter works. So Adam and Eve, for example, Eve ate the fruit, but when you look at Romans chapter 5, verse 12, it literally says Adam sinned. It doesn't make sense. Eve ate the fruit. Adam is blamed for the sin. It says through one man sin entered the world. Why is that? Well, it's very simple. Who is Adam to Eve? The husband, right? Eve committed the sin. Who paid for the sin? Adam. Do you understand what I'm saying? Likewise, we are the wives of Jesus. We committed the sin. Who was crucified? The husband. Do you understand? So it's like a very deep unlock. We are not people who pay for our own sins. We are not people who lead our own lives as well. God is telling us we're the wives. We just have to submit to the will of God. So that's why I said it goes back to the question you asked earlier. To align with God's will is you preach the gospel, which is my husband, Jesus Christ, died for my sins, washed all of my sins. He died for your sins too. That is submitting to the will of God, submitting to the husband, submitting to the testimony of Jesus. That's our sole job. Of course, you have to make money. Of course, but that's a cultural thing, right? Make money. There's some women who literally make more money than men, and they're supporting them. I mentor a girl like that. She's, super rich, Instagram influencer, everything. She supports the man, but like they both preach the gospel together. He's not like less valuable of a man, right? He's not a low value man because of that. They both love God, and she's like, yeah, I'll do it. And it was really cool.
How can a husband lead his wife without playing the role of God?
Recognizing that he isn't God, and God has to lead the marriage and lead the wife, right? So you can go as just like an intercessor does, Jesus does for us. You can go in front of God and be like, God, please don't let me, through my selfish desire, through my standard, lead my wife. Please, you pour that heart into me to lead my wife. And this is how you go to God about those things, right? So it's not like, I need to do this. I need to be obedient. Actually recognizing in Romans 5:19, you're not the obedient one. Jesus was obedient. So if you're smart, you link up with Jesus in his heart and you bring it to God. Lord, I don't want to lead and become her idol because that's idol worship. Lord, you then pour into me. You give me the knowledge, whether it's through verses, whether it's through scripture, whether it's through servants. You then lead my wife. And that way I don't take the glory and you're glorified through all of that. And man, when people do this, I see it in the couples that I counsel. They start to like not their wives start to level up spiritually, but they don't take the credit for it, and all the glory goes to God. So they stay humble, and God keeps pouring into them, and their relationships just like level up crazy. So that's the end of the episode. Hope you guys learned a lot about relationships, and if you did, please leave a thoughtful comment. It really helps us out. See you guys next week. Peace.
Perfect. That's the first time you've ever hit it one try like that.
Well, I mean, he forgot to tell them to leave 5 stars.
Oh my.
Okay, so leave 5 stars.
Well, I mean, and also we've been noticing people clipping up.
Why
the
do you
podcast.
add
Tell me-
everything?
We like
don't
clippers.
look at me. You're yelling at me. He's the one talking.
I mean, we've been noticing people clip up the podcast. We appreciate the clippers.
We appreciate the Clippers. Clippy.
Yeah.
Clippy
Tell them what else.
gang.
Tell them what else you appreciate.
I appreciate God and Ajija and Jeremy
Oh, I made the
and
list.
Elwin and Caleb
Oh wow.
and Eli and Shem.
Sam.
Damn.
Hey, what
Love
I-
y'all.
And
Hey,
team.
Comment below. Seriously, what was the best piece of advice you guys got from here? And don't list too many. Please be thorough, because we really do be reading the comments. We're watching you. We're watching you.
Also comment the advice.
No,
you,
that's it. That's the end.
also comment the advice you didn't get. For there will be a relationships episode part 2 someday.
Oh, yeah. Tell me,
Yeah.
like, man, I wish Johnny just talked more about, X, Y, and Z. And we hear you. We got ears, 2 ears. We hear twice as much as we speak. Yeah, son.
I mean, we can end it if you tell them to like put on the post notifications bell and.
Oh, yeah. And make sure to hit that little bell thingy. Ding.
And the
you know?
subscribe.
And the
Ding.
subscribe. Ding. And then write a comment, but only leave positive comments. Thumbs up, no thumbs down. Or God will thumbs down you. Just kidding, guys. Just kidding. Love you guys. Bye.